let's check in on Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin still at Davos, I would imagine, and this is where he's speaking with Maria Bartiromo in Switzerland. I
thought Davos was like floating in the.
I actually always thought the same thing too. I was like, I never thought of Davos of like having a country
as
or
a
like
place,
as like possessing any sort of nationality.
Right. I mean,
it's like a Jetson style platform above Europe somewhere.
Or some sort of like FIFA-like system in which there's bribery involved. How can we get Davos to our country?
Davos in Brazil in 2019.
Yeah, and displace millions of people for that purpose. Regardless, Bartiromo there, as well as the rest of business news, speaking to ghouls like Senator Joe Manchin. And here's this interview in which he is asked about the upcoming debt fight. Officially, the United States has hit its completely arbitrary debt limit point as of today, and Yellen, the Treasury, is going to shift money around until really the last minute, because June is when I think the crap is going to hit the fan. Democrats would be smart to preempt that, but not in the way that Joe Manchin is suggesting here.
Welcome back. Leaders from across the world in a number of sectors gathering here in Davos to discuss issues ranging from the global economy to climate change and energy. And that extends to the halls of power in Washington. Earlier this morning, I sat down with West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin for a First on Fox Business interview about the debt ceiling, bipartisanship, and bringing back America's energy independence.
Well, we have to work together. It's a bipartisan. It's always been bipartisan as far as the debt ceiling. I think what we have to do is realize that we have a problem. We have a debt problem. We're at 31.4 trillion of public debt right now. And all we're saying is, should we not make sure that we all recognize how we got there? How we prevent from going further? So,
all right, pause it. I'm sorry.
The trust funds.
That number.
The Medicare.
Sorry, that is, we will go back, but we just got to do a little bit of a rolling fact check here. Yeah. That number is accurate, but when he calls it a public debt, when there's that kind of debt, and by the way, the deficit's been reduced over the past year, but when there's that kind of debt, that means there's a surplus in the public sector.
Yeah.
So
a surplus that leads to things like Joe Manchin driving a $100,000 Maserati that's one of the most gas-guzzling vehicles on earth.
Yeah, and if he wanted to claw that back,
taxes.
He would suggest taxation, taxes on people like him. So it might be harder to buy a bit of a Maserati, although he'd figure it out in the end.
Yeah. I need my Maserati. We need kids to be hungrier. We need to balance his budget by making kids hungrier.
But let's be fair to him. Maybe he will suggest taxation.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Huh.
Where's my mouse? Okay, sorry.
All we're saying is, should we not make sure that we all recognize how we got there? How we prevent from going further? So let's take the trust funds, whether it's Medicare, Social Security, or Highway Trust. You can't let those go defunct as far as, and what we're saying is we have a trust act. And we would put different committees, bipartisan, bicameral committees together to look at each one of the trust and come up with solutions of how you fix it. We're not getting rid of anything, and you can't scare the bejesus out of people saying we're going to get rid of Social Security, we're going to privatize. That's not going to happen. But we should be able to solidify it so the people that want to earn it know they're going to get it. And that's what we're talking about. And I've talked to Kevin McCarthy briefly about that. I'm going to spend more time to find out how we can bring things together. Then we should do that, and that guarantees it comes to the floor for a vote so the American people see that we have some solutions. It might pass and it might not. And then we should look at something. The Bowles-Simpson was a brave attempt at trying to get our finances under control. We didn't do it. That needs to come to a vote also. So we could do a hybrid of that. If we can do that and we'll say, okay, we agree to raise the debt ceiling as long as we agree to identify the debt we have and how we start reducing it.
So you feel that you can identify areas to cut in terms of wasteful spending?
Yeah. Oh, most certainly you can look at that. But basically,
yeah, this part's key, but...
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just going to... The entire premise is like, yeah, we're spending too much. No, we're not taking in enough revenue.
Yes.
And people, like... It's so ludicrous that we have this, like, insane culture that glorifies wealth, right? Like, all these shows about, look at me flip this house. I'm basically, like, a moron, but I'm in real estate now, and I sold a Beverly Hills house for a $200,000 commission, right? Like, there's money in this country.
Yeah. Also, the constant been preaching about balancing your budget and being fiscally responsible from people who have lucked into millions and millions of dollars where they'll never have to actually make that kind of choice is that's something else. But so there he is suggesting essentially a bipartisan committee that he's been speaking with Kevin McCarthy on. And this is key because if the Democrats need Manchin and Sinema to hold the line on this and not cave to Republican demands, ransom for cuts to Medicare and Social Security. And yet, instead of doing what Ryan Grimm suggested and begin a process of a discharge position that would force the bill out of committee so Republicans would be unable to tank the economy or at least threaten to do so in order to get what they want, cuts to Medicare and Social Security, Manchin is proposing this. And then this is what he says and what he identifies as the flaws in the system for Medicare and Social Security.
The debt we have and how we start reducing it.
So you feel that you can identify areas to cut in terms of wasteful spending?
Oh, most certainly you can look at that. But basically you can put a system in if it's done in a bipartisan, bicameral, Democrats and Republicans in the House and the Senate working together so we know it's going to move forward or at least get a recognizing a vote on the floor. And people need to see that. Entitlements,
then cuts are off the table.
Entitlements from the standpoint, when you say entitlements, people look at that differently. They have a different terminology, depending on where you come from. An entitlement, I don't look at Social Security or Medicare as entitlement. You've paid for those, okay? But on that is there ways that we can make sure that we have the finances in order to take care of it? Is there abuse in the system? The people that have earned it and paid for it, but is there other people that haven't and things of this sort? Or is the system basically flawed, hasn't been corrected? I'm willing to look at anything and everything but protecting the people in my state of West Virginia. Medicare and Social Security is a lifeline. That's the lifeline for 60% of the people. And they're hard
So I need to be
workers.
very careful about how I attack
They don't have big pensions. They don't have big retirement systems. They have this. And we're going to make sure we protect it.
But the White House says there's
All right, there we go. So, the reasons that they don't have robust pensions or retirement funds is because we could mandate those things and make them untethered to the marketplace, for example, in the United States, but we've chosen not to do that. Those kinds of funds have become more private over time. But when he says, is there abuse in the system, what he's trying to do there is claim that there is enough waste within Medicare and Social Security or Medicare fraud, things of that nature, which happens along the margins, on occasion, but fraud happens in every sector, private business as well.
Fossil fuels.
We're not having a large discussion about, say, putting the fossil fuel industry on a diet because of fraud that happens within it. That
defense
is
spending.
Yeah, of course. There has been many audits done by the Pentagon where just billions of dollars completely unaccounted for, gone, like vapor, just gone. And yet we increase their funding on a yearly basis. There's no substantial amount of fraud that would warrant the kind of scrutiny that he's describing. What we actually can do is, as we've laid out in this show already, tax. That would reduce the deficit, although I don't necessarily care about that for the reasons I described. But if Manchin's so concerned about it, raise taxes on the wealthy. But what we can do for something like Social Security is raise the cap or essentially eliminate it altogether is what we should do on earned income, because while we do have that the cap of taxable income, while that cap is tied to inflation, the rate of inflationary increase has not kept up for decades with the rate of income inequality, which has rapidly expanded. And so income inequality is outpacing the marginal small inflationary increases that are accounted for in the tax system as related to Social Security. And the payroll tax by which these programs depend on is already regressive. So the fact that earners under 160K are keeping Social Security afloat and keeping it on their backs, it only compounds the fact. So compounds that fact, I should say. Yeah. So there are so many easy solutions that we know that we can do. We did this with Medicare in the 90s. when it comes to the cap. So for Social Security in particular, there's so many easy solutions that have been tried before that we can do. The fact of the matter is that none of those enter Joe Manchin's brain, or at least he doesn't articulate them on Fox Business, because it's all working backwards to austerity. And you just how effectively can Manchin conceal that? That's the game that he's playing.
Yeah, I mean, and as far as Biden goes, there are three paths basically that I see, and two of them are acceptable. One is like our preferred policy, which is to tax the rich and get the revenue back in. The MMT folks are a little bit more avoidant of that sort of conflict, but they offer the second path, which is mint the coin. So if this actually gets pushed to the crisis, Biden, you just got to mint the coin, and we have to do this with accounting tricks. Like you can't F around with this. And the one that he cannot take is the one where we accept like a banquet of vampires to come in and decide how much they're going to bleed people, which is what Manchin wants.
And just politically, like speaking to your self-interest, there's a reason that the Republicans tried this also in 2011 when there was a Democratic president. They don't do this. They don't engage with this fight when there's a Republican president, because they make a calculation that is going to fall politically on him. So if Biden capitulates to this and gives in to these ransom demands, it's his ass too. Not that that stopped the Democrats before from punching themselves in the face, but just from a self-preservation standpoint, you do not want to be the president that presides over cuts to Medicare and Social Security. No one's going to remember how this happened. They'll just remember that you were the leader when it did.
Mint the coin, Joe.